Good morning, and welcome to the Navy League's first Center for Maritime Strategy breakfast. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Robert Christian, Chaplain Corps Director of Operations, will now offer our invocation.
Let us pray together. Heavenly Father, since the days of Genesis, when the water was gathered into seas, you have sustained us through what is found within and what travels across. And in the days of Noah, you saved mankind with a boat and sustained by what was within inside it. And with the passage of time, the importance of sea travel grew to the point of needing a maritime strategy. Today, we pause to focus on the importance of that strategy on U.S. security and prosperity. We thank you for the speakers today who have devoted a lifetime of advocacy and education. Inspire us by what we hear. Propel us in the right direction as we navigate these troubled global times. Eternal Father, you are indeed strong to save. Your arm alone hath bound the restless wave. So please hear our humble prayer to thee as we recognize you as our provider and sustainer in all of life. Thank you for this food that we have eaten. Thank you for those who have made it. I pray this in your name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage CEO of the Navy League of the United States and 13th Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Mike Stevens.
Well, good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Navy League's National President and Chairman, Mr. Dave Riley, and our 30,000 Navy League members across the globe, thank you for joining us for this inaugural Center for Maritime Strategy breakfast. This new think tank was approved by our board of directors and unveiled this past November, and is now an intrinsic component of the Navy League's mission of education and advocacy within all aspects of DoD, government, and civilian sectors of the maritime domain. One needs to look no further than the current geopolitical conditions, the current military conditions, and it becomes clear that the need for relevant, accurate, well-informed thought leadership within the maritime domain that informs our public policy and military strategy has never been greater. For over 2 years, the Navy League worked to form this Center for Maritime Strategy. We knew that it would take an exceptional person with cachet, uncommon intellect, immense credibility, and keen insights to lead this center. And we at the Navy League are all so very proud to call retired 4-star Admiral Jamie Fogo the Dean for the Navy League Center for Maritime Strategy. When our center steering committee of Admiral John Harvey, Mr. Doug Fulton, Mr. Frank Russo, and the chair of the committee, our 31st Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral John Richardson, submitted Admiral Fogo as our center's dean, it marked a pivotal and important change for our organization. I want to pause, not in my remarks, I want to pause just a second because I saw him hiding out in the back here, but seeing old Richardson's in the crowd, and I want to just say personal thanks to him because you can't get something off the ground like this without somebody like him advising you, so thank you, sir. And I'm a little biased because I used to work with him. Thank you, Admiral. Now it's my honor to welcome our moderator for this morning's panel, the Dean for the Center for Maritime Strategy, Admiral James Fogo. Admiral.
All right, ladies and gents, can you hear me? Fantastic. I'm going to take my seat here. I think we're going to mix things up a little bit. And I want to thank all of you for getting up first thing in the morning here and coming in for the debutante ball of the Center for Maritime Strategy. It's great to see the bright, smiling faces. As CEO Mike Stevens said, and representatives of the executive committee that are out there, for 120 years, the Navy League has advocated on behalf of the Navy and Marine Corps and our young sailors and Marines all over the world. We've grown into an organization that is more than just a tri-service advocate. Commandant Carl Schultz is out there. He's been a staunch supporter of the Navy League. He's come to a number of our events, I think 6 in the last 9 months. He was here yesterday as one of our speakers, and he's done a magnificent job advocating for his service. This center is about the maritime services, about the Navy, about the Marine Corps, about the Coast Guard, and the Merchant Marine. And you heard my friend Captain Conrad ask that question of the service chiefs yesterday. We have the Merchant Marine flag up here. Where is the representation for the Merchant Marine? So we want to try to bridge that gap because they're very important too. And it was no mistake. It was done with malice aforethought that we had Miss Carrie Wilkinson give the keynote speech yesterday at the Sea Services Luncheon on behalf of our industrial base and our shipbuilders. So that's what we're all about here at the Center for Maritime Strategy. And this morning, we've got an incredible lineup of folks to come in from all over the world to talk to you about strategy, about policy, and about how those wonderful young kids are doing out there defending our nation. I want to thank our sponsors first and foremost before I get rolling. And you notice that we've got a few pictures behind us. We're going to run this kind of like a Jimmy Fallon, James Corden late night, early in the morning, as each person comes up and has shared some of those events from their life to share with you. But our sponsors that made this happen, Carasoft, and somewhere out there, my good friend, Master Chief Mike McCaleb, Ernst & Young, Leonardo DRS, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and of course, the Navy League. So thank you to our sponsors, and would you please give them a big round of applause. Now, as our guests come up to have a chat, we're going to do this one at a time, but we're into new tech here at the Center for Maritime Strategy. So on the screen behind me, there's going to be a hashtag. It'll be hashtag NatSec Maritime Century, and that's the theme of our program at Sea, Air, and Space this year. It's the Maritime Century. You can send a question via that hashtag, and my venerable staff will be collating these questions. And as we get to the end, you'll have a chance to ask a question of the group, of an individual. You spell it out. And we won't get to all of them, but we'll get to some of them. And that's one of the reasons that you came, because you have questions just like I do. So without further ado, our first guest this morning is somebody well known to all of you. I'm delighted to have the commander of the USS Pacific Fleet, Admiral Pappy Paparo. Pappy, would you come and join us on stage? Mate, thanks for being here. We're going to put you right here to my right. This man needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him an introduction. Admiral Paparo graduated from Villanova University. He was commissioned in 1987. He holds a Master of Arts in International Studies from Old Dominion University and a Master of Science in Systems Analysis from the Naval Postgraduate School. So a well-educated naval aviator and a Top Gun. He's a graduate of Top Gun. He's flown 6,000 hours in the F-14, F-15, and the F/A-18 with 1,100 carrier landings, cats and traps. He served as the Director of Operations at U.S. Central Command in Tampa, Battle Director at the Combined Air and Space Operations Center in El Aidid in Qatar, Commanding Officer of a provincial reconstruction team in Nuristan Province in Afghanistan. Now, how cool is that? And we were very selective in the United States Navy on who we picked for that awesome responsibility to be out in the field by yourself. He was later the commander of U.S. Naval Forces CENTCOM in 5th Fleet. I became a huge fan of Pappy back in the days before April of 2018. And some of you may remember that milestone. It was exactly a year after we had done strikes on Syrian chemical weapons facilities after Assad used those chemical weapons on his own people. You'll also recall that President Trump pulled no punches. He announced, "I am going to punish you." And I know that folks back here in the Pentagon, I was sitting overseas as a four-star, said, "Mr. President, please don't broadcast that." But he did, because that was his way. "I am going to punish you." And so we knew that something was coming, and they knew that something was coming. And what made this equation difficult, there was an extra variable in there, that was the Russians. They had a presence in Syria. Pappy was the guy at CENTCOM as a J3 that planned this operation. So he had plenty of help. There were more four-stars involved in this. I was a supporting commander for Admiral Aquilino, who was the 5th Fleet commander at the time, General McKenzie down at CENTCOM in Tampa, my boss, Todd Wolters, at the time in SACEUR, and then, of course, General Hyten weighed in, and Admiral Grady weighed in, because they all had a piece of this puzzle too. So he had plenty of help. Now, four-stars, as if Admiral Gortney's out there, he'll tell you about four-stars and staff officers, and they don't make good bedfellows. So Pappy did all the planning. This was tough because this strike, having the Russians in the center, meant, we didn't want to do any harm to the Russians. And they knew it was coming because it was broadcast in the media. The president was adamant that it was going to happen. And so this was a tough one, to hit targets, 3 facilities, without any collateral damage. The other tough thing about it is they're the largest number of Russian ships I'd ever seen in the Eastern Mediterranean in my life. And I did 39 and a half years. There were 35 ships out there. And what were they doing? They were shadowing us because they thought those American destroyers, they're going to shoot. Well, guess what? Fooled you, because it was an American submarine, the USS John Warner, all out in the open literature, that fired on those targets from the Eastern Mediterranean, and then more from US Navy ships in the Arabian Gulf. And then our allies and partners, the Brits and the French, joined in too from the air. So an absolutely magnificent job, Pappy, and well done to you there. You've been out at CENTCOM you've been out at PAC Fleet for about a year now. And I wonder if you just, I saw you out at West, you talked about people, you talked about your job, you talked about working with Admiral Aquilino, who's my battle buddy in the Pentagon. How's it going? Give us a how goes it? How are you doing out there? How's the resilience of the sailors? Pretty tough environment, and I think people are hanging proud.
Thanks, Admiral. First, thanks for taking on the duty of being the Dean of the Center for Maritime Strategy on behalf of every sailor in the United States Navy, of leading that effort. You're the Dean of Strategists while on active duty, so it's completely fitting that you'd be the Dean of the Center for Maritime Strategy.
Thank you,
so
too kind.
We're all most grateful to you for taking up the mantle of service. It has, in fact, it's been a consequential year over the last year. And I'll just give a brief sitrep is that the force is focused, they're dynamic, they're effective, and morale is high thus far. It has, in fact, been a consequential year. Much of the Pacific Fleet is now operating in the Pacific Fleet with the withdrawal out of Afghanistan has refocused the force from a supporting role in the North Arabian Sea back into the Western Pacific. And so we've had a year of dynamic operations with multiple group interactions, 4 carrier operations in October, and another multi-carrier operation in the month of February. And then a number of operations and exercises where the forces at 3 MEF and U.S. 7th Fleet, the forces of 1 MEF and U.S. 3rd Fleet, and the forces of U.S. Pacific area, the Coast Guard Command, Admiral McAllister's forces, have combined as a naval force. And so I'm delighted to provide you the sitrep that the morale of the naval force, of the maritime forces, is high and operating at a high operational tempo and effectively. But we face a very consequential challenge in the PRC and in the Russians. And last year we had a similar group operation from a Russian Federation Navy force who deployed at the group level off the coast of Hawaii, necessitating a robust welcoming committee that was there and waiting for them. And all of this while executing the operation of deny, defend, dominate throughout the Western Pacific as well. And I'm also pleased to report that within the naval force, the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard provides the nucleus of a joint force in being. Admiral Aquilino having appointed U.S. Pacific Fleet as a supported commander and demanding that the command operate as a JTF every day. We're operating, thinking, acting every single day as a joint task force with profound contributions from PACAF and USERPAC as well as SOCPAC to exercise really combined, synchronized joint operations, activities, and investment every single day so that the PRC and the Russians look out the window every single day and say, not today. The force is operating at the top of the Yerkes-Dodds stress performance curve. We've made our share of mistakes over the last year. Morale is high. The force's eyes are on the horizon, and we're operating effectively, but there's much more work to be done.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's great to hear positivism coming out of a senior leader out in the PAC fleet. And I know you and Admiral Aquilino have got your hands full, but just doing a great job. So what are some of the challenges that you see? I mean, we always talk about China as the pacing threat. Now you throw this wrench into the problem with the war in Ukraine that could spread beyond the borders of Ukraine. So what are you guys thinking about out there as far as war fighting, the future strategy to try to contain China and make sure that nothing breaks out? I mean, Phil Davidson walked off the stage from his retirement ceremony saying that they're going to make a move on Taiwan in the next 6 years. That's 2027. So that has a kind of a radical impact on your force structure and the way you think. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, I'd say first, I've no disagreement with Admiral Davidson, and so not having a crystal ball, we must think, act, operate every single day as if the PRC is going to make this move on Taiwan, and this would be a real inflection point if this happened. Is that really the security, the well-being of the nation really resides on the international rules-based order. And you know that within the Pacific itself, encompassing 7 of the 10 of the world's largest militaries, 60% of the world economy, and 50% of the world population, in the event that there was a armed action to change the borders of the PRC with their top-down, system-oriented version of technology-enabled totalitarianism, the rest of that incredible center of gravity of the world economy would be faced with the terrible choice of either arming to the teeth, including challenges to non-proliferation, or number 2, actually submitting to their form of economic coercion, throwing a greater weight to the block of this system that is anathema to the foundations of the international rules-based order, to the foundations of the solidarity of democracies that are enjoined in our day-to-day coalition, along with our allies and partners all throughout the Pacific. So it is an enormous challenge where we're operating under the twin remits of number 1, that is every day to win without fighting by operating dynamically so that we're offering an immediate deterrent quality so that they look out the window and say that today is not the day. The risk is for the PRC to attempt to quickly run an operation and de-escalate before the Iron Mountain of forces arrives in the Western Pacific. And the control against that risk is to have a robust on-site force that operates dynamically every single day. Deterrence itself is less an activity as it is an outcome.
Yeah.
It is that result of the prospect of you're having the capability and the will to exert greater cost than that which can be gained by aggression, and your adversary's understanding of that. So our day-to-day dynamic operations must be underpinned by a profound and real combat capability that sets the conditions for success to counter any cross-strait invasion or any act of aggression that would otherwise upend the international rules-based order, sovereignty, freedom of navigation, United Nations conventions on the law of the sea,
Right.
and so forth.
Outstanding. And people used to ask me this question all the time when I was on active duty, and I really would answer it conditionally on two different kinds of answers. Do you have everything you need? And for me, it was the difference between peacetime and wartime. So we're technically in peacetime now. Some say we're in wartime now, but do you have everything you need?
No commander has ever professed that they have what they need. No lasting commander certainly has. I am satisfied with the framework by which we are building a force that will answer the call. And that framework is inherent in the CNO's NAV plan. It's inherent in Admiral Aquilino's Seize the Initiative campaign, and I believe we've got the priorities just right in terms of what we need, and that rubric for understanding what we need runs under number one, the ability to operate with decision superiority. And so our highest priority is counter C5 ISR. Years ago, we talked about the third offset strategy, and we talked, is it some piece of technology, hypersonics? Is it unmanned? Is it nanotechnology, directed energy, autonomy? What piece of technology would give us the third offset strategy? And the third offset strategy is, in fact, decision superiority. It is our ability to understand the operational environment and to be able to act quickly in it, divided by the adversary's ability to understand what's going on, and that ability to think, act, operate faster to outpace them to win. And so counter C5 ISR is our ability to dazzle, to deceive, if necessary, to destroy our adversary's capability to know what's in the battle space. And then the next priority is essentially a real-time targetable COP. So to bolster our own ability to see and understand real-time the operational environment. And then our number three priority is our long-range precision fires and effects. And that's not only that which can be achieved with high explosive and propellant, but that which can be achieved in cyber and at the display, if you like. And then the foundation of it all is that ability to sustain and to resupply under pressure, to be able to maneuver in time and space, and to deliver 8 classes of supply, medical care, religious support at the speed of need, under fire and under pressure. That rubric, I think, that we have just right. Do we have what we need? No. Do we need what we have to? Do we know what we have to do? Yes. Do we make progress every day? Yes. And with a great thanks to everybody in industry that's helping us get there and get through that problem.
Our audience. What a fantastic answer. And I couldn't agree with you more on logistics. We've seen the failure of Russian armed forces because of the inability to sustain and replenish their units. And thankfully, I always maintain logistics is the sixth domain of warfare, and you have clearly spelled that out for us. You got to General McKenzie's retirement?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fantastic. So he's working with, I'm on the board of Marine Corps University. He's working with Phil Cosnet, Ambassador Cosnet. They're writing a book called Boots and Suits. And it's about civil-military relations, and all the time that General McKenzie, through 3 tough years down there, and you supporting him, had, and God bless him and Godspeed as he goes on into transition to civilian life. So now we're going to shift gears, and we're going to go to the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and we're delighted to have Dr. Mara Karsten with us, who had a big hand in the writing of the National Defense Strategy. So Dr. Karsten, please come up. Thank you very much. Thank you. Dr. Mara Karsten is a graduate of Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, where she earned her master's and PhD in strategic studies. She holds a bachelor's degree from Tulane University. Prior to her role as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy, Plans, and Capabilities, Dr. Karsten served as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs. She served on the policy team for the Biden-Harris transition, was Director of Strategic Studies and Associate Professor at Johns Hopkins University at SAIS, and a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institution. So amazing career and incredible intellect, and thank you for being here with us today. Dr. Karsten and I knew each other before she took this current job, and we actually spent a little bit of time together recently up at the Finnish embassy at the invitation of Ambassador Hautala, as somebody I knew from the Center for European Policy Analysis. He was celebrating the fact that Finland was named for the 4th year in a row as the happiest nation on earth. And every Finn was wondering how they got that award, because they're definitely not happy. So he brought in this comedian that Dr. Karsten and I and a host of others in the audience enjoyed for about an hour and a half that night. But he went out to Ambassador Oksana Makarova from the Ukraine. He said, I don't want to do this if it's going to be the wrong thing to do, to try to maintain humor at a time when Ukraine is under such incredible pressure and incredible carnage. And she said, no, not only will you do it because we have to maintain our sense of humor, but I will come and I will be there with you. She stood on stage and he spoke in fluent Ukrainian, a Finn, to her, and she translated into English. And we're all wondering what was going on. And she said, you may be wondering why he's telling me to tell you things in Ukrainian and I'm translating English, because his first duty station as a foreign service officer for Finland was in Kyiv, and his heart is in Kyiv. And these two, it was a tearjerker, I tell you. It was really, really great. And anyway, so we had the chance to enjoy that evening. Dr. Karsten, as I said, a big proponent of the National Defense Strategy, had a huge role there. But speaking of this war that is taking place right now, you were in the Pentagon as this was building up. You had decision authority in releasing intelligence, which really got inside the enemy's OODA loop. And we talked about that on the Tomahawk strike in the Eastern Med. It must have been surreal. Can you tell the audience, what was it like to be there while all this was playing out in front of you? It's like a script from a World War II movie.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It is such a treat to start the morning with all of you. I hope folks who are still half asleep will do everything we can to keep you excited. Thanks for that great first question. It was exactly as you say, a little bit out of a movie. I've been in and out of the Pentagon for a couple decades, but I do not recall another moment where for months we knew what was going to happen. We were able to talk through it inside the department, across the interagency, with our allies and partners, and make all of the plans, and then in many ways push play and watch it all come to life. It was more than a little surreal. I don't think there's a historical analog to what we did in the run-up to this conflict, where the intelligence community very quickly released intelligence. We would release it to our closest allies and partners to make sure they were tracking what was happening, to see if they had kind of a different understanding, but also, as you all saw, to the public, which meant that Russia wasn't able to do what it did, unfortunately, quite masterfully in 2014, which was to sow disinformation and to obfuscate about the reality of its tensions. Indeed, it appears that some folks around Putin didn't have as good of an understanding about what was going to happen as we were putting out through the press. So it was extraordinary. I think it helped us knit together with our closest allies and partners. I mean, really in a masterful way. And I think we have just seen the kind of unprecedented fruits of that with about 30 countries giving support to Ukraine. That's kind of mind-blowing in a wonderful way, if you will. And I think that has resulted in just such unity across NATO, really folks focusing on European security in a way they need. So on the whole, it was an intense period of time. It was, I have to say, as terrifying as it was. I mean, this notion that one man would choose to commit such horrific acts of aggression, despite all of the kind of costs that were being put on him, that was very hard, I think, for all of us to see. But the unity across our government, the unity across our allies and partners, our ability to marshal such a response, that has been heartening. And I think that we have together sowed seeds that will bear fruits for a really long time.
Thanks very much, Dr. Cron. So national defense strategy. You and I talked about this when we were up at the embassy, and I said, do you think it'll be out by the end of March? Will we have an unveiling before Sea Air Space? And you said, well, I don't know. It's going to be delayed at least till the end of March. Now we know it's beyond March into April, perhaps maybe even a little bit longer than that. Dr. Colin Call, Undersecretary for Policy, came out the other day and said, look, we're going to put out an unclassed version of this, but if you don't have a clearance, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see the National Defense Strategy until we release a more public and a more detailed version. And so I have that unclassed version here, and I just wanted to review some highlights with you. The strategy talks about, first of all, China remains the pacing threat. Integrated deterrence is a core pillar of the strategy. And the strategy brings up the subject of campaigning, something that we love to do in Europe because everybody had a campaign plan. AFRICOM had a campaign plan. European Command had a campaign plan. SHAPE had a campaign plan. Individual components, Army, Navy, Air Force, would build campaign plans. And we sort of patterned ours after the Joint Interagency Task Force South down at Southcom. No surprise because I'd worked for Jim Savaritis, and that's just a very effective organization in counter-drug and illicit trafficking for the United States. So we brought in the interagency, we brought in allies and partners, and we made that campaign plan something that was broad-based, and we took advantage of the expertise of all of government. So I wonder if you might comment on integrated deterrence, on campaigning, and on when we might see the NDS.
Great, thank you. So we did a couple of things for the first time recently. We released, when we were doing the National Defense Strategy, we actually did it in an integrated fashion with the Nuclear Posture Review and the Missile Defense Review. So this was integrated, and it was integrated, frankly, because as a department, I think we often have a cacophony of strategies, and it can be a little bit hard to ensure that they are both intellectually aligned and, of course, fiscally aligned as well. So over the last 8 months, these were actually done in unison, where we ensured that the folks who were thinking, say, about conventional challenges were thinking about nuclear challenges. That is, of course, so important and so obvious, and yet the department doesn't usually do it. So I would note that we did this in an integrated fashion. I would also note, as you highlighted, we actually only released the classified version so far. And we did that on the exact same day as the budget. And it was really because we were trying to prioritize that conversation with Congress. As you all probably know, a few years ago, Congress said we would like a classified national defense strategy and an unclassified. It used to just be the latter. And we thought that that was an important opportunity for us to be able to sit, and indeed I spent a whole lot of time last week sitting with Congress to help them understand, here's why you see the numbers, here are the words behind that, here's kind of the theory of what we thought through. That's important for a whole bunch of reasons, not least because there's a request for a lot of taxpayer dollars, and we wanted to ensure that that really all made sense to them. We did release this unclassified fact sheet, and after the national security strategy comes out, the unclassified national defense strategy will as well. But I appreciate that you highlighted some of the important ways that we've got in this national defense strategy, and there's really 3 of them: integrated deterrence, campaigning, and building enduring advantage. So integrated deterrence, how do we understand that, right? Haven't we all been studying deterrence for decades and decades? Don't we know exactly what it is? And yet, when we're thinking about integrated deterrence, we're trying to do it in a more rigorous and a more tailored way, really tailored to the type of challenge or threat that we're worried about. And by integrated, I mean that we are trying to knit together across the department. So that means if I'm worried about a conflict somewhere in Asia, I am not only turning to the Navy, but I'm also turning to cybercom, right? I need to look at all of the different domains, the different tools across the spectrum of conflict inside the department. Then I need to do that with the interagency, right? Because I'm going to need to make sure that I've got diplomacy first, that I'm thinking about our sanctions possibilities. I've probably got to get the other departments and agencies thinking as well. And then, of course, I have to turn to our unparalleled strategic advantage, which is our allies and our partners. Our pacing challenge of China, the acute threat we talk about, Russia, they do not have a whole lot of allies and partners lining up for them. That is what sets us apart in a whole bunch of meaningful ways. So integrated deterrence means I am knitting together across these different communities. And I think to the extent we can make that a reality, rather than just speaking about it, we're just going to be a whole lot more effective. So turning to campaigning, as you know very, very well, the Department of Defense does a whole lot of things every single day. The idea of campaigning is to ensure that those are logically linked and sequenced, that they are in pursuit of a broader objective, and that in fact, we are tying our assessments to the extent to which that objective is actually achieved. It is a little bit too easy for us to say, we're going to do that thing because we've always done that thing, and we need more resources to keep on doing that thing. What is a lot more compelling these days, understandably, right, when we see such a profound geopolitical challenge, particularly vis-a-vis China, what is much more compelling is for us to be able to say, what are those activities? What are those exercises? What are we doing? Again, not just what are the folks out at Indo-PACOM doing, but what are folks in the functional commands doing? How does this tell a story? How does this help us think about advantages and vulnerabilities in a more rigorous way? So I hope that as we move through implementing the National Defense Strategy, we will be able to make this all even more of a reality.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that clarity. And I'm sure a lot of people out there were kind of wondering about those terms and the pillars of the strategy. We look forward to seeing the full release. Now, one of the things that I was asked yesterday by a number of people is the categorization of Russia as an acute threat in the discussion of NDS. So I wonder, as I thought about it in terms of a pathologist, you have acute disease, chronic disease. So we've kind of put Russia in the category of acute, near term, maybe not long term, and China perhaps in chronic pacing threat. But I'm not sure I would agree with Russia as an acute threat. I think that scenario with Russia has been a boiling frog for a long time. They've shown their true colors. Now, certainly we painted them 10 feet tall, and they're not 10 feet tall, but I worry about them in the undersea domain, and particularly with our undersea critical infrastructure and the fact that their submarine force is pretty lethal. So might you comment for us on the definition of acute and how you see that?
Absolutely. And look, I would say those concerns you have are spot on. And we should absolutely be very, very aware of those areas in which we will need to think about pacing to Russia as opposed to China, which really is the pacing challenge. I think there are many things the last few weeks of conflict have shown us, but I think they have only furthered the view that at the end of the day, China poses the geopolitical challenge and Russia does not in the same way, right? Russia is not such an economic power. And when we look at Russia, of course, we look at the aggression, obviously, that we are seeing on our televisions every day in Europe, which is downright horrific. We've also seen aggression and gray zone conflict, as you know very well, that Russia has posed in other regions as well, like in the Middle East. So we are cognizant of that as well. And of course, when we look at Russia, not only are we seeing these kind of gray zone or hybrid efforts, but we also have seen kind of nuclear brandishing, which is profoundly irresponsible, to be sure. But I think what we are finding is that the challenge really the threat that we are seeing from Russia, it is one that we are seeing quite profoundly at this moment in time, but it does not pose a geopolitical challenge in the same way. And in fact, it is quite extraordinary to see how in many ways the events of the last few weeks have sharpened this. Not only have we seen it in terms of how Russian forces have done in the battlefield, I think probably a whole lot worse than President Putin might have thought. We've also seen tremendous NATO unity, and we have seen tremendous support for Ukraine. So I think when we look across all of this, it doesn't mean that there aren't perhaps some bespoke areas where one in particular very much wants to think hard about this threat and how you are dealing with this threat. But I think one also sees some just tremendous opportunities to work closely with our allies and our partners.
Thank you very much. What a great summary of the NDS, and folks, we'll let you know as soon as it's out. Our next guest is Lieutenant General Karsten Heckel, Commanding General of Marine Corps Combat Development Command, my friend, and one of the guys I served with over in Europe. General Heckel. Thanks for being here, sir. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lieutenant General Heckel graduated from Georgia State University and was commissioned in 1988. He was designated an unrestricted naval aviator in 1990. He's a distinguished graduate of Amphibious Warfare School and the Naval War College. General Heckel commanded Marine Medium Tilt Rotor Squadron 162, which included a combat tour in Iraq in 2008, and Marine Aviation Weapons and Tactics Squadron 1 in 2010. From 2018 to 2020, he served as the Commanding General's 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing and subsequently assumed command of Marines Expeditionary Force through September of 2021. He currently serves as the Commanding General of Marine Corps Combat Development Command. Moreover, back in my day as Commander of 6th Fleet and Strike Force NATO, he was my Chief of Staff living in Lisbon, Portugal, and did one heck of a job. And we had given up that Marine billet there. And Karsten, when General Amos found out about it, because he had served in that job, he said, I want to get a Marine back in. And I was all in, and so was Karsten. He did an incredible job over there. He also has one of the best temperaments, the best senses of humor, and he is a Marine's Marine. He is down there in the trenches with his team. So, sir, thanks so much for being here today, and we look forward to your insights. So the last Tri-Service Maritime Strategy, Advantage at Sea, was compiled by the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard, and published in December of 2020. Since that time, have you seen the threat landscape change, and is there a need to adjust or update that Tri-Service Maritime Strategy?
Well, first, sir, thanks, and I know Pappy. I was one MEF when he came out, and so I know him from his time, and certainly taking over his PAC fleet. Obviously, served with Admiral Fogo, know him well, and I've read Dr. Carlin's writings, and I'm absolutely certain that the IQ of the stage just got cut in half when I came up to the seat. So, and you saw Pappy laugh. You know, helicopter guys or tilt rotor guys, we consider ourselves unrestricted aviators because he can't hover. So that's the whole point. Just if you didn't get that. So, sir, you know, the Tri-Service strategy really underpins. The Commandant built a lot of our force design on top of that, right? I would be up here for hours talking about it, whether it's distributed maritime operations, and the Tri-Service strategy, et cetera. I don't know if it's ready for an update. I think, you know, when you go back and look at it, it got it pretty right about the threats. I would say, I wouldn't go as far as say prescient, but it's pretty good. I don't think anybody anticipated the naked, unprovoked aggression that we've seen with Putin. But they absolutely called out Russia as a concern and a threat. And to echo what Dr. Carlin said, I would agree as far as, you know, in its heyday, the Soviet Union was 43% of our GDP, and we know where China is right now. So absolutely agree. So, sir, I don't know that it necessarily needs to be updated. I think to reinforce the underpinning and the fundamental components of the strategy, the integration piece, which again, the Commandant is with us returning to being a fleet Marine force, which there was a collective cheer, getting back to our naval roots, and you know, like Pappy talked about, you heard him talk about it, right? The 7th Fleet, 3 MEF, 3rd Fleet, 1 MEF. It's a supported, and right now the fleet is the supported command, and that's where we're going with force design.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Karsten. So I know CNO is working on his 2nd NAV plan, and Dr. Steve Wills, who's the new addition to the Center for Maritime Strategy, had helped some of his folks in the CAG in articulating that NAV plan. So I would agree with you that Tri-Service Maritime Strategy has all the pillars necessary. Probably needs just a little bit of tweaking, and we'll find out about that in the NAV plan, which I believe will come out after the National Defense Strategy and the NSS, so that they're all aligned. Second question for you. How best can maritime services work together in advancing security objectives in the 2022 strategy and what you know of it? I know you've read the classified version and what Dr. Carlin talked about. So how the Marines doing out there? How are they supporting us in the pacing threat against China, in the current ongoing acute threat against Russia?
So again, everything from the force design perspective is completely centered on the national defense strategy. That was probably the initiating directive, I think, to our commandant when he started off on this endeavor of force design. I think as far as that combined with the strategy, with the maritime strategy, I think again the integration piece is just all the more critical. And I think there's a lot, and you can see there's actual tangible manifestations of that now, right? I mean, you look at, sir, your old stomping ground, 6th Fleet. We now have 2nd Marine Division off the East Coast as Task Force. You remember we had Task Force 515 in Bahrain, the Marines in support of 5th Fleet. Now we have Task Force 612, right, in direct support of, and that is Major General Donovan, the CG at the Commanding General of 2nd Marine Division in support of the 6th Fleet. So the integration piece, sir, I think is critical. And I think from the Coast Guard perspective, and as one MEF, I was actually putting Marines out on Coast Guard vessels to help in the, as you may talk about, the campaigning piece, which deters the malign behavior of, for instance, the Chinese maritime militia, right? I think we can do a better job of integrating our Coast Guard into some of our ops, particularly from my perspective in the campaigning. And once we realize the full realization of force design, I think there's going to be a real application in day-to-day ops where we're on the real estate, walking the ground with allies and partners, as you heard Dr. Karsten talk about, where the Coast Guard can even play a larger part. So, and then the only other piece where I would say there, I think one part, and the Commandant kind of touched on this a little bit with our talent management, focused on the people, right? You don't become a Marine or join the Marine Corps. You become a Marine, right? And we don't equip Marines or man equipment. We equip Marines. We need to invest in this dynamic environment and the rapidly evolving operational and security environment. We need to make some investments in the warfighters, I think. And that's kind of where the Commandant's going with the innovative training and education. That just is going to ensure that our sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen keep our services as the premier naval force around the globe.
Fantastic. Thanks, Karsten. We're going to move now to the industrial base and our shipbuilder and a man with experience both in the Pentagon and out in the field. Mitch Waldman, principal of M. Barnett Advisors. Mitch, come on up to the stage. Thank you, sir. So Mitch, the questions are lining up here, so we're going to take a couple minutes, so we reserve at least 15 for questions with you to talk about the industrial base. As I said, no surprise that Kerry Wilkinson was up here with a keynote yesterday that was fantastic about the folks in the shipyard that bring our ships to life and build ships that can protect our sailors, our Marines, and our Coast Guardmen. Mitch holds a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from the University of Florida. He earned his law degree at Catholic University of America. Prior to his current position as principal of M. Barnett Advisors, Mr. Waldman served as Executive Vice President of Government and Customer Relations for Huntington Ingalls Industries and was Vice President of Business Development of Advanced Programs and Technologies for Northrop Grumman's aerospace sector. He also served as a National Security Advisor for Senator Trent Lott, National Security Consultant to the Office of the Senate Majority Leader and Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Ships, DAS and Ships. So this is absolutely the right mix of a government and civilian sector career to talk about this question of our industrial capacity. So you've heard our three speakers from Department of Defense, OSD, Marine Corps, and the Navy talk about the mission, the strategy, where we need to go, and what we need to do, Mitch. Let me just ask you, how are we doing in the industrial base? How are our shipbuilders doing? We're talking about $767 or $773 billion in budget. That's a lot of money. We expect and demand a lot of our industrial base and our shipbuilders. Do you have enough to do what you need to do? Do you have enough direction? Do we know where we're going? And how's the morale down on the deck plate out there?
Well, thanks, Admiral, and thanks for the Navy League for putting this together. And let me just give an unsolicited plug for CMS. I consider myself a plank owner of CMS because the reality is, as you think about the defense industrial base ecosystem, it's the executive branch, it's the legislative branch, it's industry, but it's also think tanks and academic institutions. And this think tank, under the auspices of Navy League, is vitally important because the reality is the story you're going to tell and have begun to tell through this panel and the outreach across this nation is vitally important to folks understanding what we do. We talk to each other in Washington a lot, right? We're kind of in this bubble, but the reality is the story of what we do, the importance of what we do, national security, industrial base, doesn't get out often to the rest of the country. Our supply chain, and many of you who are in this room, are also a vital element of the story that needs to be told. So I thank you for doing that, and I'll encourage all of my industry partners and peers to understand what CMS is doing and get behind these folks to help them tell that story. So, Admiral, Secretary General, common man. President Bush 41 once told me, he said, you know, our founding fathers had it right. After you serve, you become a common man. And doesn't mean that you're detached. It just means that you now get to speak with a perspective of experience. And I've been honored to, as the Admiral said, be the head shipbuilder for the Navy, DASN Ships, be the national security advisor, the majority leader, and then be a member of Run Washington Officer Huntington Ingalls, HII, and be a member of that management team. And that is the ecosystem. And so when we talk about the industrial base, I want to broaden the thought of this. That I know we often say, industry, you need to get on with it, and you need to fix it, and you need to respond. But the reality is, it's all of those pieces. And I think there are examples, if you look around the world, of an executive branch and a legislature who have competed an industry out of existence, right? Or created policy that has really impacted the viability of industry. And so you got to have all three pieces, because the best requirements and even the best appropriation and authorization, if there's no industry to execute, we got a problem, right? And so we need to work this collaboratively, the challenges of our nation and national security collaboratively, and understand each other's needs. And so do we have what we need? How's industry doing? I'll tell you, I'll echo what Kerry Wilkinson said yesterday. The morale of the industrial base, we're in. You know, I was thinking about FDR, as the founder of the Navy League, but also as what he said with regard to the industrial base. He was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy guy, but he recognized that you are the arsenal of democracy. And I got to tell you, the past 6 weeks have crystallized that for me, that this nation, you all, the industrial base, executive branch, leg branch, industry, think tanks, we got to get this right. We got to get it right for the nation. And so the industrial base is in. I'll speak for you all. Thanks for the honor of letting me do that. Industrial base is in. We are in. And we're patriots, and we're going to do what needs to be done. But the reality is the construct of where we are today with our arsenal being held by private hands, that was also deliberate, right? Back in the 1800s, our arsenal was government-owned. We had naval shipyards. We had naval arsenals. The Depot Act of 1850-something said, you know, we're going to start to push some of this to the private sector. The Eisenhower administration accelerated that and said, you know, we're going to rely on the capital markets and private industry to carry the arsenal. And that's how we have the system. That's why we have the system we have today, with the private markets, capital markets, having to be interested in national security. And I have two observations. If you want to see an industrial base that's undercapitalized, look at the last segments of the public arsenal, the naval shipyards. $20 billion undercapitalized. Right? That's a huge problem. The private sector, part of what the private sector has to do to attract that capital is to be profitable, right? That is our capitalist system. We have to be able to attract the capital. We have to be able to attract the people. We have to be able to retain the people, and we have to be able to work with our customer. And so there's a ton of capital sitting on the sidelines for the national security of our nation, particularly technology companies, and the supply chain. If you listen to the congressional panel yesterday, they talked about different ways for attracting capital and attracting people. And it has to be an all-in type of a thing where you have the federal government, you have state governments, you have the private sector all contributing to this. And so I would conclude by saying the industrial base is there, they've invested, they're ready to go. The issue is, as the CNO mentioned, sustainability of that over time, right? If we don't have the work, we're going to lose our people. And guess what? They're not coming back. That is an issue. Secretary in England and I, we didn't disagree on much, but one of the things we disagreed on, he would say, build it and they will come. I said, no, sir. I said, you don't build it, they're gone. And that's exactly where we are today. It's all about the people.
Mitch, thanks very much. That was a great segue into some of the thinkings and inner workings of our industrial base. We're going to move now to questions, but I would say that you all are doing a great job. It was great to see Ms. Wilkinson representing not just one company, but the industrial base writ large, and those Americans that are out there doing such a fine job in our shipyards. I would also say that there might be some confusion out there. I'm sympathetic and empathetic with the number of ships that we want to build. So we've seen a lot of numbers flying around, 355, 500, mix of hybrid with steel hulls that are manned by our sailors and our Marines. And I think we've got to nail that down in the time period after the NDS and after the new NAV plan. And that would be my ask, and certainly something I'm very interested in, sitting where I sit at the Center for Maritime Strategy. So we're going to go to questions. We've got about 10 minutes left here from my good friend and Navy League Vice President, Admiral Harris. This is a good question because part of this is in the National Security Strategy and National Defense Strategy. And it's about climate change and the rise of sea levels. Is there a mass migration challenge brewing? Now, he directs the question to Admiral Paparo, but I would say, Dr. Carlin, you probably have some things that you could offer on this as well. So let me just pitch over here to Pappy and see what you think about the climate change question.
Thanks, and thanks to Sync. And climate change is a very key driver to our operation. The climate inherently changes, and as sailors, Marines, and Coast Guards, where we live, we must be particularly sensitive to its dictates. And first, when you think about building naval forces, and we build inside out, we start with sailors, sensors, ships and aircraft, and airfields and ports. And so inherently, the Navy and Marine Corps is sensitive just by where we live and where we operate. And it represents a threat and it represents an opportunity. And so the threat is the extent to which we've got to be able to secure our own facilities that are the backbone of how we operate. And but it also represents a key opportunity, not just in mass migration, but just in the well-being of the network of allies and partners. As Dr. Carlin said, the most important advantage that our societies have is the values that underpin us, those values of humanity, democracy, human rights, human dignity, and the rights of all to have enough food, water, shelter, and so forth. And so these twin pillars of securing our own facilities and being ready to respond to disaster inherently underpins our ability to express and to uphold the values on which all of our alliances and partnerships rest. And frequent examples of this to disaster relief in 2005 through in the Western Pacific, and then just recently when USS Sampson was on scene in Tonga in response to this tsunami. So it's I think that there are other areas within the Indo-Pacific where sea rise are threatening a number of low-lying nations, and it does represent a threat to humanity, but inside of every threat is the opportunity to uphold those values, and we must be sensitive and ready to execute humanitarian assistance, disaster relief operations at all times. And for those that are in the industrial base, we've got to be ready and able to be able to secure our ports and our airfields that underpin our ability to operate. Sink, I don't know where you are. Thank you for your leadership over the years, and thanks for a challenging question.
Ma'am, anything to add?
I have very little to add to that superb answer. I would just say it's really easy when we're trying to build strategy to think about the traditional challenges that we see from state actors or violent non-state actors. And yet, as all of us have felt profoundly over these last few years, there are these external shocks that are inextricably shaping the geography, shaping our experiences, whether that's pandemics or climate change. And so it's really important that we acknowledge that. I think the Admiral just beautifully outlined exactly what that looks like, that we see it as a challenge and also possibly an opportunity. But at the end of the day, I mean, just look at how we've had to use the Guard in wildfires in recent years, right? That is having a meaningful effect on how the Guard is being used domestically. And so we really can't ignore this and can't ignore how it is affecting the military's ability to operate every single day, how it is affecting our allies and partners as well.
Thank you so much. So we've got about 6 minutes left, a couple more questions. I'm going to take the next one from Tony King. Where does the Center for Maritime Strategy fit in the universe of maritime strategy that already encompasses Simsek, USNI, the American Sea Power Project, and the U.S. Naval War College? Great question, Tony. And that is, we all work together as a team. So we've airdropped the new Center for Maritime Strategy. And thankfully, one of my mottos when I was a Sixth Fleet commander was empower the lieutenants. I was a lieutenant once, and Simsek is made up of young junior officers in the United States Navy and the Marine Corps and some Coast Guard who are passionate about the sea services. Lieutenant Commander Matt Hipple, who was Lieutenant Matt Hipple when I first met him as the head of Simsek here, and I are joined at the hip. We exchange articles, we exchange thoughts, and I get email from Matt all the time, and he is brilliant. And so are all the other young people that are in that organization. They're Admiral Paparo's relief. The Naval Institute, I have an exceptionally good relationship with Admiral Pete Daly, who used to be my boss, and the editor of Proceedings, Bill Handlett. I participated in the American Sea Power Project, and I will include the staff and the Navy League in future editions of that magazine. I was out at West and took a panel for the Naval Institute, so we are also joined at the hip, and we are not competitors. We are simpatico in this fight for the maritime domain and maritime strategy. Then the Naval War College, I'm not a grad, but Dr. Steve Wills is, and we'll establish the same kind of relationships with them, and I've had a good relationship with them all my life. Probably time for two more questions. I'm going to combine them, and these are directed for no authorship, but to Dr. Carlin. How will the new national defense strategy utilize naval forces in the accomplishment of U.S. national objectives? And given the tyranny of distance in the Pacific, how can we rapidly build purpose-built sea lift ships to deliver this iron mountain of supplies that Admiral Paparo talked about? So, ma'am, let me open that up to you and anybody else on the panel that would like to talk about it.
Great, thank you so much. Look, to actually realize the national defense strategy, to ensure that we can effectively manifest integrated deterrence and, if necessary, prevail in combat, we have got to have a combat credible force. We've got to have a force that is lethal and survivable, a force that can get to the fight when it needs to be able to do so. And as you're hearing from me, it's got to be a joint perspective. It really does. It is a lot easier for us to focus in rather bespoke ways or to obsess over numbers versus adjectives. And yet, at the end of the day, when we look at the geopolitical challenge that we are facing right now, a geopolitical challenge that feels quite different than anything we sure have faced anytime recently, and as a military historian, I have a lot of difficulty finding a bunch of historical analogies as well. If we do not do that together, I think we will not be successful. So in particular, what I would say, I think we need to look at what sorts of capabilities we need across the joint force. We need to look at our posture. In particular, as you all probably saw, we put out the Global Posture Review on behalf of the President and the Secretary of Defense last year, and that involves some important shifts in the Indo-Pacific. And in particular, it involves a disciplining framework and a prioritization framework, so that as we are making decisions each day, we're ensuring that at the top of our mind is our strategy and what we are trying to achieve. We've got to be there because we know as challenges begin, as crises begin, it can be really hard to flow forces. You know, it's kind of extraordinary to see what's going on in Europe right now. In particular, We actually have had to flow some forces, but probably not nearly as many as we might have had this happened a decade ago. And that is not least because, especially thanks to the great help of Congress, we've been able to build a really thoughtful, sustainable posture across Europe. And our allies have been able to do so as well. We need to be able to ensure that that is replicated in the Indo-Pacific too. So what you're hearing from me is a bit of focus on the types of capabilities we need, a real emphasis on that having a joint perspective, and in particular making sure that it is tied appropriately to the challenge or the threats that we're facing.
Thank you, ma'am. That puts us down to 2 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, so we are unfortunately out of time. I'd like to thank all of you, all of our guests here on stage for coming today, and if you wouldn't mind, please give them a round of applause. Once again, thanks to our sponsors. I neglected to mention L3 Harris as one of our sponsors. Mr. Sean Stackley is here with us on the front tables. Thank you, Sean, for the support of your organization and making this Maritime Strategy Breakfast happen. We'll try to make this a continuum every year. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you at 2300 Wilson Boulevard. I'm there every day. Got a cool office. We got a coffee machine. Come on in. Love to talk to you, hear your ideas, and articulate the best for our maritime services. That's it. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Enjoy. See you airspace.